Kia ora koutou katoa, and welcome to all of the groups that have come in to present to us this afternoon. So we'll resume the community committee meeting, and our first presentation is from Neighbourhood Support. So each presentation, you'll have 10 minutes to do your presentation, and then we'll open for questions from elected members. So if we could have Jim Seumanu and Katharina Benvey. So welcome to you, and just make sure your microphone is on by pressing the button on the right hand side, the right hand button.
Thank you.
Okay, so when you're ready, where you go.
Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Katharina Benvey. I'm the board chairperson and also a group contact in Awapuni. Jim Seumanu is also a board member and a particularly dynamic group contact in Kelvin Grove. Alison Jardine, our manager on the end of the line there, is our sole employee for Neighbourhood Support Palmerston North. And our aim today is to show you what neighbourhood support looks like in action and how we can strive for a safer, more connected and resilient city.
Patalofa atu le tasmawhitanga nei te au. And I just want to share a little bit of my story of how I became a group contact and the work now on the board for the neighbourhood support. So in 2021, at the end of 2021, I retired from my teaching position as principal of the One School Global School here in Palmerston North, and worked from home. And what happened from there was quickly came the realization that actually I wasn't a very good neighbour at all. I'd lived in my street for 17 years, and I really didn't get to know my neighbours further down the street. So as you can see in the PowerPoint there, I took a risk and invited men in my street for a Sunday morning breakfast. And I thought that would be a good way to get to know some of my neighbours. That Sunday morning, 7:30, 5 men turned up. And ever since then, it's grown to around about 22 of us guys in the street who meet together every month. And we've got neighbours talking to each other. We've got friendships. We've got connections. And we're starting to talk about our street and how we can make it better and how we can, look after the elderly that are in that street and get to know each other. It's been an amazing journey. And connecting men, and we're talking about safety in our streets, and it's wonderful. But what's quickly happened from there in 2022 was that we decided as a group of men that we would invite the whole neighbourhood to a street barbecue. And all of us guys organised the whole thing, and we had a whole lot of people turn up in our street. We invited Alison here from the Neighbourhood Support to come speak to us, and that just grew into, Alison said to me, hey, it'd be great if you could come and join the board, give us some ideas, how can we, do some of the stuff in other streets in our city. So I joined on, and I thought, well, how can the stuff that I've seen and experienced in my street in that 1 year, having that men's breakfast, and this barbecue, how can we extend that through? How can we spread that love and that goodness around in our city? Imagine that, it'd be awesome, wouldn't it? So this year we reached out to the other street next to us, invited all of them to this barbecue, and that's the one we had earlier this year in March. We had about 90 people turn up to that one. We got Constable Phil to come and speak to that. So again, a real sense of community starting to really emerge in those two streets of ours. And it's just been wonderful. So since I've joined the team at Neighbourhood Support, what's happened from there is how do we grow this network around in Palmerston more? And we talked about how do we pilot something just in Kelvin Grove, because it can be quite overwhelming when you look at the whole city, right? So let's just concentrate, what can we do? And so what we did a few things, but this is one thing over the last few months that have really taken off. We've seen it's really connected men together I focused on men from the model of my men's breakfast. And about 4 months ago, we started a group up at Kelvin Grove Community Centre. We've invited anyone during the day, 1 o'clock to 2:30, to come and sit around and have a coffee and have a chat. And oh my goodness, the connection that's caused from that group is just absolutely amazing. And I've lost track of time, so you'll have to tell me. But so that's happened. We've got a network of probably about 20 guys who have turned up over the last few months, 14 guys who regularly turn up. It's just amazing. It's bringing men's confidence together. It's bringing them out of isolation. It's just making them connections with each other, friends. And what's happened is, at the same time, we're also running a group down in Takaro Bowling Club on a Friday night. And that's blowing up too, because some of the guys on Thursday are coming to that, getting more connected. And last week we had about 35 guys come down. We're playing table tennis, pool, just chilling out. No agenda, but just to bring people together, connect our community together. So, and last Friday we started a chess club, and we had about 7 or 8 guys turn up for that. Just amazing, out of the blue. And that's about to blow up too. And now we've got ideas of, we took some photos last week of guys who brought some guitars and ukuleles. And we're looking at having a Palmy men's ukulele orchestra. Wouldn't that be cool? And again, it's just bringing men together and magic happens. And I've witnessed that. So that's me. I'm going to hand it over.
He forgot to mention the woman said they didn't want to be left out. That's another whole story. So I became a group contact in my cul-de-sac in 2012. We'd had a flag taken from our backyard flagpole. The police who attended asked if we were part of a neighbourhood support group and encouraged us to get involved. Until that point, we only knew our neighbours by sight, and we'd lived there about 5 years at that time. A flyer drop led to a meeting of the neighbours in our carport. It was a really social event, as we actually got to know those neighbours. The manager of neighbourhood support at that time and a police liaison officer explained the benefits of forming such a group. Everyone was happy to sign up. Contact details were shared, and we began regular email contact and phone contact. We have social events, not quite to the level of gyms, but you can see in the picture there we have street barbecues quite regularly. We support each other in a variety of ways, from helping to find the lost animals, chatting with neighbours who don't have a lot of other social contacts, checking on elderly neighbours in bad weather, sharing our garden produce. We welcome all new neighbours with chocolates and, of course, an invitation to join the group. This doesn't seem to matter whether they rent or they're homeowners. We've had 100% buy-in, and I'm really proud of that. It's free, of course. That's the other key thing. People like free things. The new neighbours then receive an information pack, access to Alison's informative weekly newsletter, plus they also get the street group contact list. Next slide, please. During the first COVID lockdown, every night at 7 p.m, our whole cul-de-sac stood at their gates and clapped for 1 minute in support of the essential workers. It also became a time for each of us to connect at distance with each other, because it was a really socially isolating time, I'm sure you can all remember. We also had a cul-de-sac stand-to at our gates at 6 a.m. on Anzac Day that year to honour the fallen soldiers. It's the next one. Seats and Streets. This recognises an opportunity to provide a place for people to sit and connect with others. And we've got some lovely people posing up there. The street in my area regularly gets used by elderly people who like to take a bit of a breather when they're out on their morning stroll. And often it's used by families getting themselves organised with kids and dogs and things before they enter down the pathway towards the river. Now, the recent seats, as you can see there, are a little bit more colourful than the original ones. And the great thing there is it's involved a lot of young people in designing and actually doing the decoration of the seats. The men's shed are also involved in making and installing those seats for us, and they're pretty vandal-proof. And they also, you might be able to see in the picture at the bottom there, Alison's little car she runs round in, the seat, and also their neighbourhood support sign up on the lamppost. Raising our profile in the community is vital and ongoing. Next slide, please. Giving presentations to community groups, including this council committee, Engraving of tradies tools. You'll see Alison up there somewhere with an engraving tool. She often does that at Bunnings to assist tradies to mark their gear so that if it does get stolen, it's going to be returned. We had a stall at Hokowhitu near the Sunday market earlier this year. We had a lot of interest because people just want to connect and find out who their neighbours are. We also work with Community Patrol to help install the tamper-proof screws on number plates should a car get stolen. Yeah, fun, it's challenges. Challenges, we'll keep this brief. Funding. We are a charity and we rely solely on fundraising to pay our manager to do her work. It would be wonderful to have a steady income stream so that Alison can spend less time actually writing grant applications and more time working on the things that she does so well in the community. Of course, we appreciate the current economic situation hasn't helped. And the last plea there is working together smarter. I mean, we all want the same thing. We want a safer, more connected and resilient community. There should be a lot more collaboration going on with agencies in this city, including the Council's Safety Advisory Board, so that everyone who's aiming to achieve this goal can become more efficient and effective in achieving that goal. I'll now pass you over to Alison. Thank you for your attention. She's the expert on the details, so she's probably the best one to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. That's awesome. So we're for questions now. Just a quick question from me. If a street or a couple of neighbours want to set up a neighbourhood support group themselves, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Thank you. Email or phone call, and it depends on what sort of street you've got, how many neighbours you know as to how we set it up. So this morning I dropped off resources for a lady in a cul-de-sac. She knows all the neighbours, and it's just a matter of her going around with the registration form and collecting all the details. Some streets, there'll be someone moves into a street, doesn't know anyone, and so in that case I go and do a flyer drop encouraging people to join with my details on it. So if people know where their neighbours, they can put themselves as a contact. Otherwise I do a flyer drop. And in the city area, I've probably done about 10,000 flyer drops. Keeps me fit, but also it's raising awareness of neighbourhood support and enabling people to update their information as well.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor...
Also, we have a Facebook and a website too, so failing email and phone calls, we just look up the Facebook or the website.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for coming in, and that's been really useful and informative, and also puts my mind at rest because I've seen the ukulele thing turn up on my social media in the last few days, and it just seemed like there's all kinds of strange things coming from the Siamanu household. And I suppose that lent into my question. So, Jim, you talked about your men's group and how that's working in your community. The other example was quite different. How do you decide what form your activity or your connection takes in different areas?
It's mainly led by what the community wants or what works best, because each neighbourhood support group is completely different by its members or where it's geographically situated. So we're driven by what people want. We had tried in some areas to get neighbourhood support groups going, but neighbours didn't want to connect with neighbours who were gangs or criminals or that they didn't trust. Yeah. So those areas we made individual members, but we're really aware that people get in the sort of locked down, fearful situation. In another area I'm working on at the moment, they have a lot of crims in the street and people on Home D as well. But in this particular area, the neighbours are prepared to stand up and be counted and go outside their homes instead of being locked behind fences and security alarms and stand up and say, we're neighbourhood support and we're proud of the street and we want to take ownership of it. So for me, it's driven by the initial contact. You know, someone might contact me because they've been burgled, someone might contact me because they're frightened. A lot of new people to Palmerston North find it really hard to integrate into communities. So they'll contact me and say, how can I get to know my neighbours? If there's a group running, it's easy to slot them in, and if there isn't a group, I say, here's your vehicle to connect with people and say, well, look, I'm new and I really want to get to know my neighbours. So it's really people-driven, residents-driven. We work very authentically with people and how they want to connect.
That's
And
really
we've got
impressive.
such diverse communities.
Is there an opportunity to connect through local library services?
We have a good connection with the library. They, particularly at Highbury, they're really good at connecting with the residents there. I have a lot to do with them, and they promote neighbourhood support and get people to sign up as well.
Thank you.
So the libraries are great, and they've been sharing Jim's flyers as well. So we're getting all sorts of different people from different areas coming to those groups.
That's great. Thanks for answering those, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and welcome, guys. I see you monthly, so it's good to see you here. Alison, can you just give us an idea of, just in terms of the current coverage of the city, the number of members that we currently have in neighbourhood support?
Probably over 20. Well, it's definitely over 20,000, and the geographical area goes down from Linton up to the top of the Pahongina Valley, Ashurst, Bunnythorpe. Yeah, it's quite diverse. Like, I get a lot of different, right, the rural areas will get hit with stock thefts and things like that, as well as thefts from cars in the CBD. You know, the variety of work and coverage we do is amazing. But yeah, there's a lot of rural areas as well, and their needs are obviously quite different from businesses in the CBD.
Great, and I guess my next part is really just to talk about some of the hard to reach communities, and I know that you're actually working with a couple of streets at the moment. Could you perhaps just give, without sort of giving too much information, just perhaps give us an understanding of what you're actually doing in those areas?
So the more recent, and there's been, you probably saw the article in the paper, a street with a lot of issues around it, and so there was a meeting off-site, which in the past in other areas I've worked at, it's better to get the residents out of the area. They feel fearful, particularly one area there was a gang house and juvie offenders in the street, so they didn't want to be seen meeting with neighbourhood support, so we met off-site, actually at the library. In the more recent one, we've met off-site and people registered to join and talked about their issues. It is driven by a really dynamic woman who wants the best for her community, and she wanted to move out of the street. She was so fearful. And when I went to drop resources, so we had a community meeting which was really well received, and from that I just get texts every day, because people can communicate with me however they like. So this particular group, they're really into texting, and I was given 30 cell phone numbers of people who wanted to join who couldn't get there. So it was a lot of texting late at night trying to connect with these people and finding out where they lived. And they have really engaged because they're not fearful. And when I went to drop the resources off in the street the other day, you know, this woman, she came roaring down, I pulled up at a letterbox, she came roaring down the road on the wrong side of the road, speeding, and toot, toot, toot. Hey, hun, come on, here you are, thanks for coming, hun. Jumped out of a car, banged a hand on the horn, yelled and shouted and said, come on, bro, over here, come meet Alison, she's neighbourhood support. Well, look, this street that's got all of this problem, they could see my sign-written car and me looking really subtle in my uniform, and they just came out and talked about their fears. They talked about a refugee family that's just moved in who's living in absolute fear because of their neighbours, and then they came shuffling out of their house looking petrified. And the difference was that these people were prepared to stand up and be counted, and we have neighbourhood support. We deliberately wear pink shirts and have signage and street signs, because if people see the letterbox stickers and that, they know that it's a street that cares about what's happening and they want to be safe. So yeah, that's one street I'm working with, and it's just been great. Really good having a good positive, and all these other agencies are going in, but you have to remember that we are a charity. I'm it, from the wonderful board and people like Catriona and Jim, but I'm one person and I do everything. I raise 100% of my salary and all my expenses, all from grants. So to do that, and when places where they have issues in the streets, they'll get everyone else in, like police and FENS and the council and everything else, but little old neighbourhood support, we have such a dynamic input into neighbourhoods through our goal of making safe, connected and resilient communities. And it's hard sometimes to think we have limits, you know, as a charity, but by gosh, we're making such a difference in the community, and often it's unseen. You know, the interaction we have with people is absolutely incredible. Can I just tell one more thing?
Well, I was just about to interrupt you, Alison. We are a little pressed for time. We've got
Right.
4 groups presenting, so
Okay, sorry.
maybe we've got time for one more question. Maybe just keep the answer relatively concise. Thank you, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity, and thank you all for being here and presenting. Just wanted to pick up on your last point on the slides around working together smarter, or working smarter together. I can't remember which order the words were in. Could you give us one, or at the most 2, kind of practical examples of what that means for you?
Okay. I think it means that there are an awful lot of little groups out there trying to do exactly the same thing. And really, if we had that collaboration, things would just work so much more smoothly in this community. And no disrespect to the Safety Advisory Board, but I was on a board like that in another town, and it was much smaller than the city, obviously, but it really made a difference having neighbourhood support involved in that group, because we're on the ground. We're not working at high level, but you need the people on the ground that know exactly what's happening. And there are lots of other little groups that are doing the same thing, and sometimes we know who they are, sometimes we don't. But if we could get that collaboration, that would be just fantastic.
And
grow.
what's needed to actually strike that collaboration? Is it that the contact details aren't there, or the conversations haven't been had? Or?
The conversations need to be a little bit more courageous, I think, and we need to, wave our flag a little bit more. We do it, but we need to take that on board ourselves. We need to be able to say, but we're only a small group. There's 9 board members. We're only 10 people, including Alison. So, those other groups are aware of us. So it's a 2-way process.
Great. Yep. Thanks, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of questions. So thank you very much for your presentation and for being available to answer questions, and thanks for your work in the community. Much appreciated. Thank you.
And I just finish with one last thing. If any council members are not neighbourhood support members, you know how to contact Alison now.
Thank you. Now, Youth Council representatives, are you ready to go? Yeah, okay. So we will now invite Youth Council. We've got Amelia and Eva, Youth Councillors, coming to present on behalf of the Youth Council. So welcome. And it looks like we've got your presentation now, so that's good. There should be a little clicker there. And just remember to turn your microphones on.
Hi, nice to see you all. Thank you for accommodating our little technical slip-up. My name's Eva. I just want to apologise in advance. I seem to recover from one bug and then catch another, so my voice is a little bit iffy. But I have been on the Youth Council since 2022 when I was a year 11. I'm now year 13. 3 years I'm looking at. And I am the current secretary of the Palmerston North Youth Council.
Kia ora, I'm Malia. I joined last year, 2023. This is my second year on the Youth Council. I'm a year 13 now, and I'm the co-chair of the Youth Council.
So for those of you who don't know who we are the Palmerston North Youth Council. We're a group of 19 passionate and community-driven youth. The youngest on our council is 14 and the oldest is 22. We are attempting very hard to see ourselves as an extension of the council, connecting Palmer youth with their communities, local government, council and government, and each other. We have developed a Terms of Reference and Councillor Handbook, and that states that the role of a Palmer Youth Councillor is to role model service by in for rangatahi, develop opportunities for the betterment of youth, and connect youth of the city with the council and the community. And this is our motto.
So by Palmer Youth for the Palmer Youth, so we do our best to represent the Palmer Youth well, and this ties in with our terms of reference and our council handbook, trying to represent Palmer Youth and do what we can for the youth of the community.
So Malia and I were both on the council in 2023, and upon reflecting and having all of our past councillors leave, we saw that there was an immense opportunity for growth, and so we really put our heads down and decided to really hone in on seeing that growth and improvement manifest in how we operate as a council.
So we started off the year with a noho marae at the end of January, and this was an effective way of streamlining our induction process, and we also elected our executive committee at this noho marae, and so it was a fantastic way to start off the year connecting with the new council members and having a really nice send-off with the ones that left last year. So that included most of our executive committee last year, so it was a good way to learn from them and take any final lessons and get connection from the old ones to new ones. And that is something that we will be introducing from here on out. That was the first one.
So we also devised our 6 po while we were on noho marae, and those kind of collectivise all of our shared interests. So there's mental health, there's our relationship with the community, there's rangatahi and Māori values, and then other things. And these are kind of the foundation of how we strive to act and better the community for youth. We also implemented a few new systems. So last year we've had some problems with the delegation of work. We found that kind of there were only a few of us rowing the boat, and that kind of showed in the events that we were producing. So we've streamlined that process. We are at the top we have our executive committee, and then we have been split into 3 subcommittees. So that is media, events and submissions, and those cater to the interests and strengths of our team and mean that the events and media and all that we put out are the best that it possibly can be.
So at the top we had our executive committee, and this consists of the co-chairs, secretary, treasurer and media executive, as well as each of the subcommittee chairs every second week. So these roles are filled by people who have experience and are able to teach the rest of the council. Sorry, this wrong slide.
No, it is. Right.
So this is all part of we have had an executive committee in the past years, and this is just been extended to include further and deputy roles. Sorry, my eyesight. Apologies. Yeah, thanks.
So our media committee consists of those who are all graphic design, and as youth we're on our phones a lot. Be the first to admit that. So that is, we have found the best way to reach people in our community. We have established a LinkedIn page. We are in the process of creating a BeReal and a TikTok account. We also are collaborating with the Manawatu Radio Trust Board to create a podcast. We regularly post on our Instagram and Facebook, and we find that we have a lot of views and interactions, and that shows in the people who turn up to our events. These are just a few of our posts, and also just a few stats. So we have reached so far this year 4,891 Instagram accounts. We're currently sitting at 1,103 followers, and 600 of those are new over this past 12 months.
So the events subcommittee was created as off the back of what Eva said, just to create an ease with the delegation of tasks and the events that we hold for the youth throughout the city. And this has just been people that are more interested in organisation and getting involved with youth in other ways. And the entire council has had the opportunity to bring their ideas for events, but this has been an incredibly effective way to streamline the process and create a more efficient way of actually creating the events.
So just a few highlights. We are trying to increase our participation in both council endeavours as well as our own. So we've been involved in the Festival of Cultures, Festival of Colours, ETHKIC, Wacky Water Day, and also tree planting days. We've also run our own scholarship ceremony, been involved in the Youth Wellbeing Forum with the Youth Services team. We've also run a networking event to connect high school leaders and secondary school leaders, and also an international tertiary students event which has connected international students at Massey University in UCOL with their community and Palmy youth. Just a few images from some of our events. This is a relatively new concept to us. We did not, in the past we had not submitted on any submissions, so we developed our subcommittee. We've presented on the Animals and Bees bylaw, objected to a liquor licence. Obviously, we submitted to the long-term plan, and that was a really great example of the cohesion of those groups. And also, we just recently submitted on the emissions reduction plan.
So Festival for the Future is something that we have been to for the past few years. I know Eva's been a few times. Unfortunately, neither of us from the council went this year. You're still welcome to ask questions on it anyway, but it is an amazing opportunity that we also, so that's part of the scholarships that we do. So it's an annual trip attended in July, and we hand out communities to communities. We hand out scholarships to kids in the community to give them the experience of going too.
We also ran our scholarships as well after a hiatus last year. We were able to grant $8,000 to talented Palmy youth. It was a very rigorous selection process, and we were very formal in the way that we did it. So we went through numerous moderation processes. We used the council software as well, and we sent kids to Dallas for robotics, people around Europe, and also someone just recently recorded an album. We've also making a concerted effort to keep in touch with the people that we offer scholarships to and things like that.
So the relationship with PNCC is something that we're trying to foster and grow. Over the course of 2024, we have consistently acknowledged its identity as a PNCC entity, with what we discussed as being involved with more council events, which includes last year when we were part of the Playfest and other similar events. So we hold our weekly general meeting in here, which is really exciting for us, and over in the Missoula room. We have a very formalised meeting process, which is something that has again developed over the past year, including agenda and minutes, as well as other executive committee meetings, and all the subcommittees have meetings. And in the future, we are seeking further knowledge and recommendation from the PNCC members and teams to enhance our engagement and processes. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. You've finished now? Yep, that's awesome. Thank you very much for that. And we'll open up now for any questions. So we'll start with Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for coming and submitting to us. Just wanted to ask, so you say you're representing students, or you've got members on your committee as young as 14, as old as 22. Obviously, you're both from Girls High, but how many schools are represented on your youth council now?
Girls High, Boys High Awatapu, Massey University, Tutoa, and Freiburg is currently what we're sitting at. Yeah.
And how many members have you got over there, or who are school leavers?
Currently
Only
two, yes.
Great.
We do also keep that in mind in intake, thinking about diversity and
trying to well represent the city.
Trying to diversify in that area. But we do consistently reach out to schools that we aren't represented by. So when we had our networking event, we invited students from Manukura and all those schools that aren't represented in our council.
Great. 19 would have to be the biggest youth council I've ever heard of. How many applications did you actually have this year to join the youth council? Were there 40 that applied and 19 got through, or were there 19 applied and what was the level of interest you had?
I believe it was over 50. I'm not completely sure, but I know that in terms of last year, Kai Mahi, when they were thinking about branching out into those groups, we wanted to make sure that they were able to be sustained. So they, we used to have about 12 members. So if you think about splitting that into 3 groups, that's about four people per group. So it's not exactly wasn't how we were going to get the intended result. So I think the group was daunting, the number was daunting at the start, but it's been very good in terms of, when people get hit with illness or other things, other commitments get in the way. We still have a full council over here that diverse range of perspectives still.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for coming in today. My question was about when you're submitting to council processes, and an impressive list there of the things that you've involved yourselves with. Where do you draw your information for your submission to that? Is it just from the 19 of you, or do you go more broadly than that, and how does that work?
So we kind of pick a submission based on the interests of the council, but we seek deeper and further diverse knowledge through our social media, and also we've run a few events. So our LTP consultation, we had, post-it notes and whiteboards and youth space, and we welcomed ideas. And also when we went to Festival of Cultures as well, we were consistently welcoming ideas. We also have polls on our Instagram. I think we received about 1,106 responses to those polls over the LTP consultation. So it's really that cohesion between the subcommittees, which is how we get that done. And also just word of mouth. I mean, we're all very involved in the community, so just going out and spreading the word. And I think we actually had a few we kind of influenced a few extra LTP submissions based on that as well. So that's good to see as well.
That's excellent. Do you have a sense that there's any particular segment of our youth community that you're not reaching?
Those who aren't in school, so all of our members are either in school or in tertiary education. So we did have a few members who weren't in school, but unfortunately they're not on the council anymore, but we are still trying to reach out to those people and have included that consideration in our intake process at the end of this year.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for the presentation and all the work. Just wanted to follow up a little bit around the scholarships program to understand kind of how heavily that's subscribed, and the $8,000 that was awarded, how many recipients were within that?
So the recipients, I believe, was 7, and we had quite a few groups. So there was a dance group that was about 40 kids that went to LA, so we sponsored, just gave them kind of a grant. There was also the robotics team, but I believe it was about 7 people. Okay. It was very rigorous selection process, and it was consulted and voted upon. We elected a scholarship committee, so we did peer marking and things like that, and there was a moderation process. And then we brought that decision to the full council, and I believe deliberations were about 2 and a bit hours between who got what money and, the rankings of how everything worked. So it was also quite new, considering we weren't able to give that money out. We weren't able to get it organised for 2023. So it was just great to really get that money out to the people that deserve it as well that time, yeah.
That's great. Congratulations on that. And just for perspective then, so 7 awards were made, but how many were applied for? Was it dozens and dozens?
Yes, I think that number was about 112.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of need for that money. Yeah. Very difficult decisions. Yeah. Because a lot of talented young people in Palmerston North, and also great to network with those people, because it's great to know, for them to know that, be aware of us, and also us be aware of them for future collaboration and those sorts of things. So, yeah.
Cool. Great. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation and for being available to answer questions, and for bringing some new ideas and energy to Youth Council. So it's been good to hear from you and hear about your projects and your plans. So all the best. And yep.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you. So what we're going to do, elected members, is just hear all the presentations and then do a kind of a catch-all resolution to accept them all at the same time, just in the essence of speeding through. So I'd like to invite now the Pacifica Reference Group to come and present. And we've got Courtney Manu, who's the co-chair, and Maggie Leota. So talo falava, and welcome to you.
Bulavanaka, hi everybody. It's great to see you all again. It's been an amazing year. I think we can all say that whilst times are not great, I think as a reference group we are very proud to be sitting here today and to be presenting back to you some of the things we've done over the last year, but also talk to you about some of our priorities moving through to the new year. So you all know who I am, but I want to take some time to introduce one of our awesome Pacifica Reference Group members who sits with me today, Maggie Leota. So I'll let her introduce herself.
Kia rana koutou katoa, lo ingoa o Maggie Leota, o te sau mai Samoa, Marco Carlin. Not only am I a proud member of the Pacifica Reference Group, but a proud member of the 4412 community. I currently work in the health sector, and in the past 3 years I have also worked in the Pacifica and iwi space for the community. Outside of the working space, I am a proud member of the sporting community, so I have been connected to many people across Palmerston North through sports. Mea taki.
Awesome.
Okay, so the Pacifica Reference Group is made up of 14 Pacifica community members who are from Tonga, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Cook Islands, Samoa and Otama. We represent our diverse and beautiful Pacifica cultures and community groups at the table and provide perspectives and insights when needed as a group.
Aren't we so good looking?
This time last year we presented our goals as a group to councillors, and we wanted to recap on some of those goals. Promote our Pacific languages and culture, promote and deliver a range of programs for Pacifica by Pacifica, Papaioia Pacifica Community Trust, develop a visual presence in Te Maraeohine and around the city, investigate the development of a Pacifica community hub which includes a whale whono meeting house, medium density housing spread around Te Papaioia, not concentrated to certain areas, Pacifica youth representation, consultation. We have worked with local council to develop the Pacifica Artist Residency and whanotanga. This has seen our local artists connect, revitalise and enthusiastic to work locally and also to build more relationships nationally. As part of our goal about developing a presence in Te Maraeohine, we continue to celebrate Language Weeks. Our colours get presented in the clock tower, and we've also connected with long-standing artist Albert McCarthy to understand the history of Te Maraeohine. We continue to engage with our community and bring them on the journey of local government.
And just to touch on with our Pacifica Arts Residency and whanotanga, we really want to thank Anton Carter, who was really pivotal in the role of connecting us with Creative New Zealand and City Council to create that initiative, which is now in its second year here in Palmerston North, and one of our newest Pacifica artists is here today, Epe. So congratulations, Epe, and your group. It's a real honour to have, I think, someone like Anton who's been able to pave the way for us to achieve some amazing long-standing things which are sustainable for council and our community. We have also, across the last year, attended the PNCC Youth Forum, which was held last year. We had multiple members attend the Youth Forum to continue to establish relationships across the youth sector and also to bring in more of our Pacifica young people into that space. A few members have also joined the Palmy Build space to understand the works happening across the building sector for our city, learning more about medium density housing and urban housing that our city is talking more and more about. Pacifica Fusion celebrated its 20th year anniversary, of which again we're lucky to have Auntie Helen, our festival coordinator here, and Epe, who's also our secretary, alongside our co-founder of the festival, Tiana Fauolo, and Kopu, our other exec member, who have continued to build for our young people in high schools this incredible 20-year legacy. Isn't that incredible? This year, Pacifica Fusion Legacy was also launched, which now creates a space for our primary aged Pacifica students. And most of you will remember our most recent engagement with Council around the presentation to the long-term plan. Our community worked hard to engage with our community in numerous ways, with numerous organisations and individuals to mobilise our community to have our voices heard. We wish to thank Council today for listening to us and for meeting our ambitions with your commitment in the recent long-term plan. Why am I getting emotional? I think it's really incredible to see all the work that people like Auntie Helen have done and Tiana over the last 20 years, and to be able to continue to advocate off the foundations that they've built and to start to see councillors really committing to some of the things that they've been talking about since I was a child in the city. So thank you for that commitment. It means a lot to our community and they're so excited about what's next. And rest assured, it's just the beginning. So talking about 2024 and 25, our focuses, this is where I think we know that the rubber really meets the road, is making sure we do the do. This annual year, we would like to focus on making sure we support local iwi and tangata whenua as tangata moana, encourage and co-develop the co-development and adoption of a Pacifica strategy by PNCC with our Pacifica community to enrich the growth of our inclusive city, ensure the Pacifica perspective is consistently integrated into the delivery process, work in collaboration with the community to build up opportunities for more Pacifica-led events and festivals with key stakeholders, engage in conversations within our city regarding housing priorities, safer communities, health outcomes and cultural inclusion / celebration for all residents, assist the broader Pacifica community in enhancing the leadership and governance skills of our Pacifica providers, organisations and individuals, promote Pacifica youth representation and consultation and develop opportunities that elevate Pacifica youth and continue to explore the concept of a whale whānau. So whilst we have as a council, you guys have committed to the first stage of the refurbishment of Bill Brown, we would like to continue to make sure that we're exploring the opportunity for the growth of that space or whatever that space may look like, because we know that the population of Pacifica are going to continue to grow in the city. And so whilst that's the first commitment, we need to continue to grow as a city with those commitments and think bigger. And that whale whānau is something that we're still definitely set on trying to achieve as a city and working together on over the coming years. Lastly, we wish to acknowledge, as we do in our Pacifica culture, all the people that have walked with us over the last year. It's been a huge year. I feel like we as a group have really been committed, and it's been an excellent opportunity for us to have a seat at the table, but also for you guys to come to our meetings and listen to us, and also have us in your spaces. So we'd like to thank Anton Carter, Councillor Katie, who's come to every meeting, Salome, Steph, Olivia, Amy, and councillors who have also attended our meetings over the last year. We'd like to thank our community that made submissions to the long-term plan. Without you, advocacy work doesn't really occur successfully. It requires the voice of all. And to our Pacifica Reference Group members who give their time as a koha to this space to support the goals of our city and the Pacifica community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and Maggie. That's brilliant summing up. I'll open up for any questions. Just one from me first of all. Are council staff coming to the Pacifica Reference Group to ask for your input on projects and ideas at an early stage? Is that working?
Yes, so Salome has been doing an awesome job connecting us within council in the operations space. So we have at every single reference group meeting, we have somebody from council coming to talk to us, whether it's about projects or programs, to do with civil defence, to do with building and making sure that we're understanding what's happening. We're definitely connecting in. I know that there's also a responsibility on our end to then connect back in to make sure we're being fully informed, but there's definitely a good connection now. I feel like we're starting to get a good understanding of how things work and how we can feed in with more purpose rather than just feeding in because we want to be heard. And so, yeah, it's definitely working. I think it's working well currently, and I think our group would agree that we're connecting well.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, Maggie. Really appreciate you presenting today. Just, I wanted to understand a little bit more maybe what might be possible in that inclusive city comment around Pacifica, and I think you talked about consistently integrated into delivery process. Are there some examples of what you think good or great would look like in that space?
I think what good or great would look like is me not bringing it up, but like to get really into the action-orientated part of that. I think what we know right now is that, and we saw it during the local government elections previously, where our people don't vote. They don't come to vote because there's not a great understanding, or there's a gap in understanding around why they should vote or why it's important to vote. There's a lack of accessibility to council, to councillors from a community level. And so I think there's some work there to be done around the inclusivity around engagement, so being more out in the community and engaging with our community. We know that there's barriers to that, and so that takes time to build relationships, and being able to build those relationships is really important. I think we've built that relationship within the Pacifica Reference Group, but it actually goes wider than us. And so it's been great to have councillors come to our Pacifica Reference Group meetings, because they've been able to see firsthand the talanoa that happens face to face in that space, and then from there make their own connections moving forward into the communities, because we are a large community, we're diverse, and within the diversity of our community there's so many different cultural aspects to every culture that's represented. So it takes time, and I think I had a feeling that question like that would be asked today. I think the best way to get an answer to that is to come along to one of our reference group meetings and talk to all our members about how that would best look for their cultures or their communities. Because again, whilst we're a reference group, we actually represent our communities, and we don't come from an organisational perspective, and we're not an organisation or a governance or we're a reference group. And so I think it's really important that in understanding that it's a lot deeper than that and takes a lot more engagement from our level. It's quite complex, but doesn't need to be, if that.
Thank you. Appreciate you unpacking that a bit. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Spellin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Similar along these veins, sort of, as from the previous question, is that you're quite a young council, a reference group, as it's been in for a couple of years, and as you say, it takes time to build your profile in the community. So I'm just curious, I know that you're doing a lot to make those connections. Do you feel that you're resourced, or PNCC is putting resource into making sure that people in your community know that you're here and what your role is? Are we doing that well, in your opinion?
I need a good cop at the moment. I think, yes, to a degree, but again, Pacifica Reference Group is only one group of people, and I think in order to fully resource how you connect with our community, because it is so large, it takes so much more than just that one touch point. Do I think it's the foundations are being laid? Yes. Do I think it's starting well? Yes. Could it be done better, and could it be done, could there be more of it? Absolutely. There's we've got local elections coming up. I'm sure you're all very aware of that. And so as a community and as a committee, we're mindful of that coming up, and we've been doing work for months now trying to get our community at a ground level informed around what's really important coming up to local government elections, because we know that in order to inform our community, that takes time, right? From a council level, we should already be having these conversations around how we're engaging with communities that can't understand some of the resources out there, can't access the internet, can't access the website profiles for how to vote. Maybe we know that there's certain demographics. It's not just Pacifica, it's other minority groups as well. So how do we make sure that we're doing the work now, rather than waiting 3 months out from a local elections to then engage with communities and then wonder why they don't show up? Or they don't show up because we didn't show up in the first place. And it's not just, as you're saying, it's not just a community member's responsibility, but council also have a responsibility ability to put more resource into that space if they want people to show up and they want people to vote and they want people to have a say. Pacifica are only turning up into council now because we have, or I believe, because we have a reference group and because we have a Pacifica advisor within local council, which has been fully resourced. Pacifica reference group, none of us are remunerated for our time. We all give our time freely. Most of us in Pacifica reference group sit on multiple boards and sit in multiple spaces, both in corporate, charity, like every space. We're all trying to do the most that we can off a very little budget. And so I think, yeah, can you do more? Absolutely. Can you resource more for the minority groups so that you can see them better reflected and you can hear their voices? Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Right, that brings us to the end of questions. So thank you very much for your presentation and for all of the work that you're doing in this space. I should have said at the start of the presentations, but presenters and supporters are very welcome to stay for the afternoon tea break. We'll be providing a cup of tea and a biscuit, as much as council resources can allow, so that you've got an opportunity to speak to other groups and also to elected members. So with that, I'll invite the final presentation for this afternoon, which is from the Senior Reference Group. So I'll invite Jim Jeffries, who's the chair, to come and do that presentation. Thank you. Nice use of correct use of an apostrophe, I approve. Welcome.
That work? Kia ora, Madam Chair and councillors and council staff. Before I start, I'd just like to say thank you to the 5 members of our group who are here today, either in the audience or are supporting me now, and Martin, who's our minder, we'll call him. And does a great job for us. I'll ask Russell and Joan to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. I'm Joan Spencer. I come from a background of over 30 years working for local government. And I've retained my interest in it. It's like once you've been in local government for that length of time, you don't stop being interested in it. And overall, I think PAMI does a good job, but I can see a lot of hurdles in the future. So we're mindful of those as a group. Thank you.
Russell.
Kia ora, ngā mihi mai kia koutou, ko Russell Hallam Takawingoa. Yeah, I'm part of the reference group. I'm involved in quite a few little organisations around the place, particularly around the advocacy for seniors in our city. And I probably have met face to face with most of you at some stage. So therefore, I just appreciate the whole support of a reference group such as this and the other reference group. And I think that our council should be commended for the support they do give members of the community to be able to work in such fashion. I do have some complications sometimes of where we go from here. Whether a reference group is a reference group only gives advice, or a reference group that can actually advocate openly or not. So, but that's Jim's job, not mine. Okay, kia ora.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess we'll just move on to the second slide, if that's right, which is a summary of what we're going to say. Yes, I guess it's fair to say we feel that the group has operated well, providing advice and guidance to the council as they impact the senior sector. And perhaps almost in answer to your earlier question, the previous group, Madam Chair, we have listed in there many of the things that we actually have had presentations from from staff or have actually provided input into in a consultative fashion, really. And perhaps just maybe a comment on one or two, and my comrades here are welcome to make a comment, and particularly later on when we answer questions. So, just a comment on one or two of them anyway. The speed limit review was one which we did give some feedback on, and felt that the lowering speed limits in the city would be beneficial from a safety point of view. We were very, very happy about the extended free parking for Super Gold card holders, and I'm sure we're all very good users of that facility. In fact, it did. I guess we all have a lot of networks out there in the city, and I know a lot of my friends, most of them who are in my age group, actually make use of that. So thank you for that that extension. And you can see there's lots of other things there. I'll comment on the age-friendly thing. In fact, I know, Russell, you've actually been very much guiding us along the way for that, and we're particularly happy that a resolution was passed by council to become involved in an age-friendly city, particularly from our point of view, friendly to the senior age group. And we understand that that's in process. The staff member who was employed to get it underway, we understand is no longer there, and I hope that doesn't mean that that process loses momentum. So we would, I guess from our point of view, it's something we would actually be observing and keeping an eye on, and would like some feedback from council staff in particular on that. Play in the city, that was an interesting one. I guess one of the things that came up when we discussed that was the vitality in the central city, and the Central City Play Development Program, which was presented to us, was very much supported. Great to see some activity and vitality introduced into the Central City. We considered the terms of reference, and there were a number of items that came up in our group under discussion there. One was perhaps our group doesn't have the degree of cultural diversity that perhaps would be beneficial. We're very much aware, of course, that Pacifica Group, who you just had presented, present a view from those angles. But one of the things is, I think, there that members of what we would call part of our diverse community don't see themselves comfortable in that environment, and it's difficult to see how, because I know council went out for expressions of interest, and it is hard in some cases for certain communities to find themselves in the situation it's not, they're unfamiliar with. So it's perhaps something to bear in mind. We now have a rollover of membership, and to look in some ways to look to increase that diversity. We do actually have a couple of vacancies on the committee at the present time. So anyway, that's just something that came up for comment when we were talking about the terms of reference. And in that context also, during the year, it was actually in June last year, I think, Melissa Hemi from Rangitani became part of our group to represent Maori interests. So then we welcomed her onto our committee or group. The last item on the list is actually probably the thing that we most got involved in, and during the year we had 3 presentations and briefings from council staff on it. We had if I could just have the next slide too. We had a special meeting in April to actually bring our submission together, and that submission, which we've got a few comments there. You're probably clearly aware of all those because you would have seen and read closely our submission. But I suppose if there was one theme that that came through from that, really was because the sector of the city we represent are generally on fixed incomes. Anything that actually becomes out of the ordinary in terms of increased costs of rates is actually is something that we focused on, and you would have seen from our submission that our theme was around things that actually increased the costs of living when our membership, I call it membership, or people we represent tend to be on fixed incomes. The things like the debt reduction, the supporting a change to the rating system, that was an interesting one actually, and that there was a lot of information supplied in regard to a 70-30 split. We looked at that and felt that because a change of that of rating system, the magnitude of its effect on individuals unevenly spread across the city. We felt the 70-30, because the information supplied to us indicated that 70-30 would, I guess, dampen that the extent of those effects on individuals. And when it was put through, we understand it went 50-50. So we're a little bit unsure about what difference there is between the individual effects of 70-30 versus 50-50, because we didn't see that the analysis that was actually provided for that initial 70-30. And then there was the Nature Calls project and community facilities upgrades and the seismic work and the age-friendly work we're keen for to continue. So, and I just reiterate some thanks to the group, members of the group, and it's great to see five or six of us here today to be part of this presentation, and particularly also, I think, as I mentioned earlier, Martin, who definitely has been a very wise guide for us as we've gone through. So I don't know whether.
Sorry, Jim, your time is up now.
Oh, is it?
Thank you for that. We'll open up for any questions. Just to say, I just have a quick word with the General Manager around age friendly, and that has been assigned to another member of staff. So that's still in progress. So Jim raised the question of whether or not the work of age friendly was continuing. So I was just reassuring, sort of answering that query, that the work for age friendly has been reassigned to another member of staff. So it should be continuing. It's not just been dropped, in other words. Hopefully that's a reassurance to you. You don't look convinced. All right. I'm not sure what would be a reassurance then. I will open up for questions. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for coming in today. It was really in response to your comment, Jim, about the 70-30 to 50-50 move for the rates change, which triggered the question, are you able to request from council officers presentations that you would like to see, or are you on the receiving end of presentations officers would like to give you?
I'm not sure that it might be just that would be a matter of interest, because I understand now it's all happened, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. And you could ask, well, I suppose my question is, could you ask for a presentation to help you unpack that and understand it better? Or do you just get what you're given?
I think we can ask. Usually we've got opportunity to ask, and the staff have all been really good that we've had. I felt this year with the long-term plan was probably one of my great interests, but I liked also the sporting side. I like to see a council with a vision not just what's happening today or tomorrow, but we were aware, I think all of us were aware of the costs, so we tempered our requests and what we'd like.
Much appreciated.
Because
Thank
of
you.
that. I felt that was always in our background. What we really would have liked to have seen, we realised was not practical. Do you think so?
Yep.
So we were prepared to accept things without just fully understanding, you know, what you had in front of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, thanks. My question was probably a little bit similar to Councillor Bowen's, really, just in terms of the interest that your group has taken in the LTP process and the specific items that you presented in your submission. Yeah, I was just interested to understand what mechanism you have to close that loop to get the feedback on where we landed, because those are all issues that were very well debated in our chamber, and obviously they're visible online, but you'd have to find them through the many hours of debate. But yeah, I just thought it would be good to have an understanding if you've got access to getting the answers. I mean, we can have perhaps further conversation about that afterwards. But
Yeah, I can answer that, Councillor. We actually have the staff involved in the long-term plan have offered to come and give us a briefing on what we submitted on and how it was actually dealt with in the plan. So that will happen at our next meeting in a few weeks' time. Yeah.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation, all the work that you're doing through that reference group. I guess the thinking behind this question is a little bit driven out of some of the response from the Pacifica reference group, but there's kind of the conversation about connecting from the reference group into that wider community. And I just kind of wondered what you feel like the opportunities are for the seniors reference group to connect out broadly into the thousands, you know, of seniors that live in the community, and kind of, is that on your radar? Is it resource? What, like, could that happen, and what would be needed to make that happen?
Russell might be want to comment on that, because you have actually Russell has involvement with the which was age friendly, and that obviously is a group that it has tentacles out into the community. Yeah.
I'm sort of wondering which number bus that is. I think the main issue here is, the main answer to this is it's a selection process in the beginning was looking at people who had networks and connections within the sector across our city. So mainly, I think that we're quite open for people to be able to bring forth from those connections without saying we represent that group. It's important that we are not there as delegates, we are there for the reference group, but having input from the networks that we are either involved with or have connections with. That can be broader, and I take what Jim talked before. Maybe we can look at diversity. I think there is a few of the 120 cultures that are, I think, around in our city. I think we're probably missing a couple when there's only 12 of us, I think. So I think that the work could be done on that. There is a limit. I think it's 14 that can be on the group. I think we're sitting around 11 or 12 now. So I think there's a need also for discussion on succession, which we're having ourselves. So there's opportunity there. I think, like Courtney said, we can say, are we doing well when we're communicating with the community? I think we can do better work. I think we need guidance on, again, what our role is, or where we stand to actually be able to speak publicly. My understanding is probably that if we want to speak publicly or go public or make public comment, we would need to have conversation with council first. So that dialogue, I think, is something that we can build on through the processes of the reference group. And I have to say, and agree with Jim especially, that the support we get from the council staff and that councillor is appointed to the group is a sign of the working together between council and the reference group. So thank you for that. I can't really go, Jim, much more about how we can get out to the rest of the community without further discussions of where we go from here. So, kia ora.
Thanks. I mean, that answer is helpful, and if there's, if that's as far as you want to go, I guess I was particularly struck, quite a bit of your conversation, Jim, was around the long-term plan and kind of reflections on that, and I was struck by a lot of the conversations in the community, and especially it seemed to me a number of people in the demographics of this reference group were either feeling quite distant from council or increasingly distant from council. And I guess I was kind of thinking, is that something that you see through the reference group, and is that something that the reference group might be able to in some way help heal or connect any disconnects that are there?
I would just say one example where I've had quite a bit to do with my friends, because when you're retired, I actually did some work for council on counting buses and how long the buses took, and I was able to actually tell people quite a different story than sometimes the press was giving, that it wasn't all gloom and doom. So that was just able to just pass on to quite a few people. And I think in other areas we could do it as well, and we do that after we've heard from the council.
That was a very good example, because Joan actually mentioned in the group, for example, the average stop time of the buses as they go through Featherston Street. And I was able to actually tell my friends who had actually been influenced by what they read in the papers, that in fact there were some pluses to actually that as well. So that's part of the networks that we're actually experiencing as we go through our work.
Great, thanks for those examples, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And last question, Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I was just really curious, perhaps we could take Council Officer comment on this, just in terms of that tension that's been surfaced around the reference group's ability to perhaps publicly comment versus their kind of their relationship with council. So I just wonder if we can unpick that tension.
I think Amy is going to come and have a word on that. Are you, Amy? Amy, Acting Community Development Manager.
Yeah.
Kia ora koutou, ko Amy Vals tōku ingoa, Acting Community Development Manager. Could you just clarify what you're looking for?
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair, I took myself out of the queue. No, it's just really around it's been mentioned that the reference groups, there is sometimes a tension between what they can articulate, perhaps publicly, versus their relationship with council officers, and just managing that tension, because I guess my feeling is that the reference group should be able to speak quite openly and make comment about things that affect seniors, and sometimes maybe there's some conflict, so it's about managing that conflict. Is it a problem, or is there a solution?
We certainly want to be supporting our reference groups to speak freely. It's the purpose of why we've established the reference groups in the first place, is that they're able to liaise with council, share with us their experience and their expertise. We do have the terms of reference that are set up that runs across all of our reference groups, and we're constantly considering those terms of reference as well. As you know, we're going to set up a new youth development reference group, which is giving us pause to look at the way that is structured, but certainly it's not the intention to prevent members of the reference groups to be able to speak freely. Yeah,
Great,
both in their engagement with council and to the communities that they're serving.
No, great, thanks, Amy, that's helpful, thank you.
Thank you. Right, that's the end of the questions. So thank you very much to the Seniors Reference Group for coming in and doing the presentation and being available to answer questions. And thank you for the work that you do in reaching out to the community and advising council. It's appreciated. And please feel free to hang around for a cup of tea shortly. So we have one more item of significance. Oh, sorry, yes, we just need to receive the presentation. Sorry, thanks, Sarah. So we need to formally receive the presentations that we've heard this afternoon. So I'm happy to move that we do that. Seconded by Councillor Hancock. I will open up for any brief comment if there is any. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and being brief. It was a reflection on having heard all of those presentations together today, which was very useful, that I think there's an opportunity for a shared understanding of the work that the different reference groups do, there's some overlap there. Some Pacifica people are seniors, some of our youth council members are Pacifica, or maybe they're not. And a shared understanding, maybe a presentation to each other's reference groups might help you to find shared areas of works or opportunities to strengthen the engagement on particular topics by leaning into multiple communities all at once. So I just wanted to mention that in this context, see if we can pick that up. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comment. So just to reiterate, on behalf of council, that we do very much appreciate the reference groups and also community groups coming in to present to us about work and hearing where things are working well, where there might be room for improvement. It's very, very valuable. So thank you very much for all the work that you do. So we'll just move on to the last substantive report. Oh, sorry. As you can see, I'm quite keen to be moving on, but we will take the vote first. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. And that is carried, 9 votes for and none against. Thank you. Okay. We will move on to item 10 on page 61, which is which is the Te Whare Koru New Animal Shelter Closeout Report. I'll invite Bryce Hoskin and Bill Carswell to present. Thank you. And note that we do have Bex and Ross available if there's any more detailed questions. Welcome back.
Kia ora, councillors, and I'm pleased to be able to present this highly anticipated report for you, Ms. Chair. This report, we've tried to provide a pretty reasonable summary of the events. For council will be aware, this project goes back a wee while, all the way back to about 2018, when we first identified that our current facility was not compliant. And there's been several reports between now and then, including the audit report of the pre-construction phase that I think was presented in 2023. But all in all, the project from that point has gone pretty smoothly. The construction went very smoothly. The contractor has performed well. Unfortunately, we have only by a smidgen gone over the project budget, unfortunately. And at risk of sounding like I'm downplaying that, $60,000 on $7.5 million is not bad. But to give some assurance as well, that wasn't actually from the construction, that was just from some other things, project management time and the likes that unfortunately just slightly pushed us over. But all in all, look, I think the end result, and I know several elected members have gone through the site and came down to the opening as well. I think it's another building that council can be quite proud of. From the Ministry of Primary Industries perspective, that they have passed through my details in particular to talk to several other councils that are either going through a similar process or are about to. So we've been having, I know over the last sort of 12 months or so, I've had at least 4 or 5 different conversations with my colleagues around the country, looking at this project, some of our learnings on it, what went well, what didn't. So I suppose we're a bit ahead of the curve in that sense, but I think ultimately we've set a bit of a benchmark for the rest of Aotearoa, which is a nice place to be. So happy to take any questions and go easy on me. It's my last report.
Thank you very much, Bryce. In that vein, we have Councillor Naylor with the first questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Bryce. I did send a few questions through on the email, just particularly in relation to 2.10 on page 63, where it talks about future growth and allowing for surge capacity and immediate growth. And I understand from the objectives that's one of the objectives that was set out for this project. Do we have information on what our current average occupancy is and what our peak numbers are now as compared to when we started out on this project?
I might invite down one of my colleagues, I think it might be Ross, coming down, who will be able to provide that detail.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ross McDermott, Team Leader, Animal Management. Through the Chair, we've looked at our data and found it is difficult to work out the occupancy because we have an impound date and a release date, so trying to work out how many dogs are in there each week is proving to be quite difficult. We have managed to get down to months, and when you look at the numbers that are there, there's been 3 months where it looks like we've exceeded capacity, but over the week, spread out over that month, we've never exceeded the kennel capacity of either the old shelter or the new shelter. I'm hoping to provide some more detail on that with the dog control report as well.
So when I think when the original report came to us, when the business came to us, it talked about per night, like dogs or animals per night, how many nights a dog was housed, and so how many kennels were full on average per night. I think it was about 17% occupancy at that time. Do we keep stats on this? Is this something that's monitored at all by staff to understand? It appeared that there was a lot of empty capacity at the time. I guess it would be good to have an
Sorry, what's the question?
Yep,
Councillor?
I'm getting there. Do we collect that data to understand how much capacity is being used and how much is empty at any particular time, like on a per night basis?
We do capture the data. Like I was saying before, it's difficult to break it down to the per night because we're trying to look at when each impound overlaps the next sort of thing. I can say for the last probably 8 months, I haven't seen less than 10 to 15 dogs in the shelter per week.
You haven't seen less than 10 to 15 per week, so would they normally stay for the whole week?
Yeah, and within that range sort of thing, we'd have about that many dogs each week.
And so what's the maximum? So it's never been full, is that what you're saying?
I've never seen it full.
You've never seen it?
No, we've got pretty close a few years ago. I think we got down to having 6 kennels vacant in 1 week.
I
so
think,
Madam Chair,
I think Kerry Lee would like to add to that answer there. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the Chair, Kerry Lee Proberg, General Manager, Development and Regulatory. We have had some difficulty drawing the exact stats. As you know, we have changed our regulatory system, and we're just having some difficulty pulling down to the daily stats. The issue Ross is alluding to is obvious, as you'll be aware, the dogs don't all arrive on one day and leave on another day, so we're actually having to drill down into the individual dogs to get those. So we are working on that, and we will have that information available for the annual dog report, which is due in October. And additionally, we did host Rangatiki and MDC last week, and we'll be hosting Horowhenua in October as well, just to see if there's any ability to work together, so that if we find that we aren't using the capacity of the shelter, we may be able to look at some form of shared services with other councils.
Perfect, thank you. That answers my next question, so I can skip that. Just in terms of page 65, talks about the lessons learned. We did receive a business assurance report sometime recently that outlined lessons learned, many of which haven't been included in this report. I'm just wondering why that is.
Yep, that was the business assurance report I was referring to earlier. So absolutely, that had a number of learnings through that pre-construction phase, rather than copying and pasting them into this report. Instead focused on some of the more broader learnings and some of the ones through the construction phase as well, because that report only went up to construction. So trying to focus on some of the other lessons that we've learned through the process as opposed to those.
Okay, and just final question, the conclusion on page 67, it says that the project was an undeniable success. I'm just wondering on what basis that comment's been made.
At the beginning of the project, we set out with a number of objectives in mind, as the report illustrates, and we have delivered on those. Given we've done that, despite it being a challenging project at times, I think council, I would suggest council can reflect back on saying it was a success because we've delivered on the objectives.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got to ask Bryce one last question. It isn't necessarily exactly pertaining to the animal shelter, but you said it in the Papui report and said it again in this one that you did it within budget. But I just want to understand, when you say that, do you mean within budget and contingency? So when we went 60,000 over, we used 60,000 of the contingency, or we used the whole budget, the whole contingency, and went 60,000 over?
So in this case, we've gone $60,000 over the total project budget. So we used the contingency, all of it,
okay.
And went an additional $60,000, unfortunately, over the top of that.
Appreciate it. What was the contingency for this project out of interest? Was it 15, 20?
We went in with 20%, I believe it was, off the top of my head.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on that contingency, am I correct? Was that in 2.31 that was the contingency of 600,000?
That was the contingency associated with the construction.
Yeah.
So there was, but 20% of 7.5, I guess, is a bigger number than that. So not all of it went associated directly onto with the construction contract. That contingency was used to ensure that we could successfully deliver the project as a whole.
Okay. And can I understand the delay in opening? Was it correct that it had some heating issues or something around the underspecking of the heating from what was
We're currently working through that at the moment. So there has been a slight delay from when we did the opening, when it was physically completed. We did the opening, we then worked through, and we now have practical completion and a compliance certificate. We're currently sort of working through that defects period at the moment. The heating is one that, unfortunately, it's not performing as we had planned. And we're working through that at the moment around what the solutions are and exactly why that is. Again, I don't want to downplay that as it's not an issue, but at the moment I don't think it's anything to be alarmed of. It's just we're working through that, and it's not performing as it should, so we can deal with that through existing budgets of maintenance if there's anything to be done, if there's anything to be spent by council, which indeed it might not be.
Can I understand, so the heating installed, was that to the what was prescribed as the specifications for the install, or was it under installed?
No, so as part of the design, it was specified at a certain level, and that's what was installed. So the bit when I say we're investigating is we're trying to investigate now why it's not potentially giving us the output we would like.
Okay. And can I understand, why would we be going to the neighbouring authorities to see if they've got any capacity when we've built for our needs, as I understand it?
I'm not sure if Bryce wants to answer that, but Kerry Lee can answer that since she brought that up. I think it's the other way around, Councillor.
Yes, sorry, I obviously confused things. We were reaching out to the other councils to see if they would like to be able to, if we have excessive capacity at any time, whether there's a way that we can work with other councils. It was a suggestion brought out by councillors in a forum earlier, so we were just following through on that suggestion or request.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So if we have spare capacity, we could offer it to others rather than the other way around.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Is that the end of your questions, Councillor? Yeah, okay. Councillor Bowen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I hope this is an easy one, Bryce, for your last round. 2.5, you talk about review and condition grade of the existing facility found that its current state did not meet the obligations of the new Temporary Housing for Companion Animals Code. Can you just remind us, what were the risks that council was facing with a non-compliant facility?
Well, probably the major one is we were, Ministry of Primary Industries could financially fine us, and that was a rather large sum. I can't recall exactly, but I think it was up to about $1 million a year. So it was a big number, and it could become a very, very big number if we weren't working on that. Because we were putting plans in place at that time to be working through, they gave us a bit of a transition period to get a solution in place. And before we proceeded into awarding the construction contract, we took the design back through them for approval, which they did to endorse it, to try and mitigate that risk. There were other ones, of course, around welfare, but I suppose that's probably the most permanent one around building the facility we did.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That is the end of the questions. So, Hari Ra, Bryce. And thank you very much, Bill, Ross, and Kerry Lee. Right, so I will move that the committee receive the report entitled Te Whare Kuru, New Animal Shelter Closeout Report presented on 28th of August 2024, seconded by Councillor Hancock. I just have a few comments to make. The first one is, I think that I would agree with the officers that this has been an undeniable success. This has enabled us to move from having a non-compliant facility which did not meet animal welfare standards, and in which animals were, until we rectified it to some degree in a temporary measure, were not getting heating, didn't have adequate ventilation, there was no isolation, the kennels were dangerous, and also staff were endangered, into a facility which is meeting all the requirements of the new code. So we are now compliant and not at any risk of being fined. But more importantly than that, from my perspective, is that we've now got a facility that meets needs of the animals that we are keeping there. And that's very important. To me, animal welfare is an extremely important aspect to be considered when we're taking responsibility for housing animals, whether they've been impounded or whether they're strays. To me, it's very important that we look after their welfare and make sure that they are adequately cared for. You know, it was, I think, a shameful situation that we found ourselves in, that animals were not receiving adequate care, that we didn't have someone on site to monitor them, and that we didn't have adequate facilities. So I'm actually very proud of this. I understand that some council members didn't want us to build this, didn't want to spend the money on it, but nevertheless the money was spent, and I think we've got an excellent facility, which has opened up options for perhaps some revenue gathering in providing joint services with other councils. All in all, I'm extremely pleased, if not to say relieved, that we now have a compliant facility, somewhere where our staff and the animals are safe and well looked after. So I'd just like to thank all those involved, and also the contractors, Lee Builders, who I think did an excellent job in difficult conditions. So thank you for that. We'll now open for other comments. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, on a positive, I agree that that this project has delivered on its objectives, and absolutely, as the Chair has outlined, we now have a compliant animal shelter. And as the conclusion points out, it's a state-of-the-art animal shelter facility that sets a new standard for dog shelters in New Zealand. And I'm also really grateful to hear that there is some progress on looking at perhaps finding some additional revenue from other councils. What I'm not so excited about in terms of this project is that I feel that we're also setting a new standard for dog shelters in terms of cost per dog per night. Whilst we don't have that information, and I am concerned that we don't actually have current occupancy, a question that I sent over the weekend that isn't able to be answered yet, but I look forward to seeing that in the dog report that comes. An earlier report that we had, as a city councillor, it's really important to me that we have health and hygiene standards and high standards of safety. However, it's also extremely important to me that we are stewards of ratepayers' money, that we look for value for money. This is probably the most disappointing outcome for me in terms of value for money for ratepayers. In terms of the cost per dog, per kennel, when we looked at the Papaioia apartments, places that had been developed, and I mentioned how great I thought that was at about $160,000 per unit for people to live in permanently. As that compares to each kennel at this animal shelter is a similar amount, and dogs, one dog is only there some of the time, we don't know how much of the time. So from my perspective, the value for ratepayers' money is really minimal in this investment. So for that, from that perspective, looking at the objectives and reflecting on where we started and where we've arrived, in 2.8, the objectives are outlined there, and I do wonder going forward when we have projects like this that we do actually need to include some sort of value for money objective in there. Otherwise we can reach these high standards of delivering high quality facilities, but there's kind of a lack of context to actually how much we're spending to deliver that of our ratepayers' money.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project, I just wanted to capture some reflections on it, because I see Councillor Naylor's right. We did need to move, and yourself too as Chair, saying that we couldn't stick with the previous facility, and that was below standard and didn't meet the requirements. Very acceptable on that pace. But when we start to move to the options, what we've moved through is to the gold-plated, best-in-class, state-of-the-art facility, which I described, and I think quite fairly, as the Bark Royale of dog or animal shelters in the country. And to say that this has been an undeniable success, I think the proof's still unproven, and will be left to see around the scope and design of what we put in place. Prior to embarking on this contract, even with the design, we knew that the Manawatu District Council didn't want to come in and combine with a shared service in this regard. And yet we still built enough capacity for us to have double the population on the current dog registrations and the kennel use of what was reported when we made the decision. And so now we still go ahead and build it and have all this capacity, and then of course we're going to try and get our neighbours to try and bring the cost of operating it down. And of course when we went to have our dog registration ratio reviewed recently, we had to put more of the dog registration onto the city ratepayers because the previous ratio was out of sync now with the overhead cost of the animal shelter, not being a user pays proportion. And I know there's a city good in doing that. That's not, I won't deny that. But the weighting now of our city ratepayers having to pay an increased proportion of the ongoing operational costs, I think is a little bit unfortunate. Certainly the degree that we've shifted in that direction. Councillor Naylor's highlighted the cost of a build of a residential social housing unit and then the cost of what it costs per kennel. And I recall when we did some value engineering out of the original quote, which actually come in well over $8 million, to value engineer, I think close to 700,000 or 800,000 out of their proposed budget of the tenderer, we moved dog kennels from 4 metres square down to 3 metres square, which was cinder blocked kennels, and the amount that was allocated to that was working out at 15,000 per square metre. And if you're into developing homes, and it was even agreed in debate, that is anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 a square metre to build a quality home, and we're building kennels at 15,000 a square metre, something is hideously wrong with the cost evaluation of building cinder block kennels. So in this cost, why we might have kept in budget, I believe the budget was so inflated for what to build that type of square metre for the use. And so I just want to highlight that concern. The other learnings did come through that business assurance report, and I think we should capture those in balance with what's been highlighted in this report, which actually did bring some concern around how the project got assessed for scope in the initial stages. And I don't want to lose sight of that because I think there's some important learnings that we should keep in mind when we're doing other projects similar to this. So with reflection, yeah, we've got a quality, it's been well regarded, and I think we've got so much capacity. And sure, we might be a bit of a star at the making, but as I mentioned, I think to call it undeniable success, I think the proof's in the pudding with the ongoing capacity, and again, for the benefit, I think that's unproven because of the cost impact on our ratepayers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now I understand why we were being hustled along all afternoon, so we had one more opportunity to have a thorough conversation around the merits or otherwise of this new facility, and has been certainly interesting hearing those comments and reflections so far. I think where I would start is in my journey on council so far, 8 years here, I can count a very few times that I've had a visceral response to an activity that I have undertaken as a councillor. And touring the old and totally unfit for purpose facility, seeing what our staff and officers were having to work with, seeing the just conditions that were there, left me with a deeply visceral response. And I think you used the word relieved, Madam Chair. I too am relieved that we now have something that is indeed up to the job. I'd like to comment a little bit around metrics, because I'm just a bit lost as to why a value judgment's being driven around costs per dogs per night. I mean, the best way to approach that would be to lock up a whole bunch of dogs, so it suddenly appear to be really cheap. I mean, I just don't understand. This is about having a facility that serves the compliance needs and functions within this city and for our future. And so I think getting hung up on metrics that are actually counterintuitive to the overall purpose of excellent animal management in this community, which is that a lot of dogs aren't locked up. Yes, we need to have some reserve capacity in case we get to a point where they need to be. I think it's a rather perverse metric to bring in and emphasize. To the point around it being, you know, best in class, I reflect back on perhaps, you know, another significant project, which is the replacement of a 1960s wastewater treatment plant. What we got in the 1960s was best in class. The Prime Minister came and opened it. It was lauded and celebrated as the best wastewater treatment solution in the country. And what that has delivered is over 80 years of performance. So yeah, you can build middle class, you can build just barely scrapes by, you can patch whatever you want to patch. The reality is this is significant longevity, significant future proofing, and therefore great value for future ratepayers. We could have kicked the can down the road, and then we probably would have had a big conversation about wanting to keep rates low because we had to go and replace the thing. Well, this is investing up front and getting that value built in to our city, ensuring that we are future-proof and future-ready, and I think that we can and should be incredibly proud of that. I'm really pleased that, you know, Bryce's phone is ringing hot on the week that he's working his way out of council here, because it is good to know that actually this is being recognized through the sector as a path to be followed. Sure, if there are ways that a further dollar can be engineered out of it without compromising, then let's look at that. And we'll no doubt learn from other councils as they're down that track. But certainly for me, in terms of where this has gotten to on balance, it has been a successful project, and most importantly, one that has addressed a significant need in the community and for the animal welfare needs within it. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, to completely agree with Councillor Barrett's comments here, and especially that about the visceral reaction to going through that old pound. You know, as a council, we're quite lively, quite loud when we're all together, and I remember vividly how quiet this group, not this group of councillors, the group of councillors there at the time got as we went through that pound, finding myself in a kennel space where I could hardly turn round was absolutely confronting, shocking, appalling to me. And coming to this point of the process, I want to be really clear about where we started. And that's why I asked Bryce about the risk that we were facing as a council then. We, as often is the case with Palmerston North, I think we were quite early adopters in the good dog pound way back in the day. And so when the Code of Compliance changed, what had previously been a good dog pound was quite clearly not a good dog pound anymore. And so, yep, what we've got now might be, I can't remember what the term is, leading, gold standard, whatever. Actually, it's not. It's just the first dog pound to be built that meets the standards of the new code. And meets it very well, I'm sure. We've done an excellent job. But there are lots of other councils now having to step into this space who will come to us to see what we've done. But I don't think that makes it gold standard. It just makes it the standard. We have met the code as required. And we have built into that the things that we asked for as elected members, which is about future-proofing that, so that we don't keep having to have this conversation. We've built something that will serve our community for the next 50 years. I'm very proud of that we've taken a decision for the future of our ratepayers, not just for the ones who shout most loudly today. 50 years of future-proofing built in to this project, I think, is something to be incredibly proud of. And yes, if in the meantime that means we can help with surge capacity in other local authorities, excellent. Excellent if they want to pay us for that. That is a very good outcome. But it's something we've asked our officers to go and explore, so we can't then be grumpy that they do, and then we've got some space maybe to put some extra dogs into. We can't have it both ways. You can't be cross if they don't and then cross if they do. So I'm relieved that we've got to the end of this. I know none of us wanted to spend this kind of money, but all the way through the questions were asked and answered we tried really hard, and Councillor Dennison talked about some of the value engineering processes that we went through to try and find a way to reduce this budget. None of us said, yes, please, bring me that dog pound from Singapore option and we will have it. There was never that conversation. I think there's a little bit of rewriting history here for people to suggest that that's ever what anybody wanted. We wanted a dog pound that met the standards, that enabled us to meet the needs of our community now and into the future. And that's what we've got. And I'm pleased that we finally wrap this one up, put a bow on it and release it out into the wild. I'm glad we're at this space now. Thanks.
Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to put a very brief comment in as someone who was not around the table for any of this, so very much a spectator. But it does appear, you know, in a sense to be yet another case of capital investment that's required from councils or our council to meet government standards which have changed. And when I was doing my research into this, there were media reports at the time that were reporting the fines for non-compliance as $150,000 per day that our facility was non-compliant. So I think it's very prudent action that we've taken to meet that. But to the points about growth and planning for growth, I think this and the way that's fed into this facility is that we have a growth agenda as a city. We're planning to spend millions and millions of dollars on expanding the city for a greater population, which will inevitably include a greater population of dogs. So if we're planning through our FDS and through our housing and business needs assessment that we're planning for lots of growth, I don't think we can be so choosy about what growth is acceptable and what isn't. But also, aside from the inconsistent approach, I think there's some inconsistency of going the success isn't proven yet, because it conflates the successful delivery of a project and then the successful operation of the animal shelter going forward, which are different things. So I think the success of the project can be claimed to be a success because it has delivered on its objectives. The success going forward, and whether it proves to have been worth it or to wash its face in terms of funding, that's a different issue altogether. So just wanted to put my 2 cents there as someone who wasn't involved in the process and just looking at this as an outsider. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just exercise my right of reply. You absolutely cannot compare the building of a specialised facility like an animal shelter with a residential dwelling. They are not the same thing. It is a specialised piece of building. The security that's required, the drainage that's required, the ventilation that's required, the heating that's required, they're not like building a house. So it's just simplistic to say, oh, well, looking at the square meterage, this is a very expensive project. Think of it like building a hospital or building any other specialised facility. You can't compare it to a residential dwelling. So that's the first point. The second point is that this need for us to have an animal shelter is mandated by government. This is part of our core business, councillors. We have to provide an animal shelter. We have to provide animal management services. We need to be compliant with the law and the regulations on how to run those shelters. There's no choice about this. This is not one of your nice-to-haves. This is absolutely core business that we have to do properly. And I'm surprised that, even this late in the day, there are still some councillors that want to try and, I guess, second-guess the decisions that we had to make years ago. But nevertheless, I guess each to their own. We've got over 8,000 dogs in the city at the moment. I think the number of kennels that we've got is not excessive by any means. It's not a simple matter of just having a number of kennels. You need the right size of kennel for the right size of dog. You need some kennels for isolation facilities that are separate from all the others. You need kennels for dangerous dogs so the staff can manage them safely. A kennel is not a kennel is not a kennel. So I'm afraid that some of the comments just really showed that some people have got no understanding of what's required in an animal shelter to keep animals and staff safe. It's absolutely not a gold-plated facility. We reduced the size of kennels significantly to the minimum. We cut out an education room, which would have given us some extra capacity. And, you know, I don't think anybody could say that this was a gold-plated facility. And frankly, I'm offended by the persistent... Councillor Dennison, first of all, can you not interrupt when I'm speaking? What's your point of order?
It's referenced in 3.1 that we delivered a state-of-the-art animal shelter. Is referenced in the report.
Sorry, what point of order are you making?
You're using my comparison of gold-plated to state-of-the-art and differentiating them.
So are you being misrepresented?
I think I'm being a little bit...
Did you say gold-plated?
Yes, I did.
Okay, then how have you been misrepresented?
In the report under 3.1, the officer says that we've exceeded delivery... Despite exceeding the delivery program, the project was an undeniable success, delivering a state-of-the-art animal shelter facility that set new standards for dog shelters. So I was just comparing that as a gold-plated comparison of state-of-the-art.
Well, you've made your explanation. I still am allowed to make my comment, which is that I don't believe it is gold-plated. Oh, my goodness, you're all point of ordering me now. Just hang on a minute. Councillor Bowen.
I feel that misrepresents the officer's comment in that state-of-the-art cannot be conflated with gold-plated. They are different statements. State-of-the-art, I looked it up, the most recent stage in the development of a product. That's not gold-plated, that's just best practice.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. I'll now continue my comment. I do take offence at the persistent trotting out of the line of Bark Royale. It's a nickname that Councillor Dennison has coined for this project to be able to poke fun at it and to disparage it, and I find it highly offensive. This is a project that we needed to do, that we had to do to meet compliance. It is a specialised one-off project, and I think that all in all, it has provided exactly what we asked for it to provide. And I thank the officers for their work on it. And if I'm to go by the feedback that I've had from members of the community, there are very many members of the community that are very grateful that we did this. So with that, I will ask you to vote. Thank you. And that's carried 8 votes for and 2 against. Before we break for afternoon tea, and after that we have a workshop, I just need to cover the committee work schedule, which is on page 79. So I'll just ask the GM if there's any comment that you'd like to make on the work schedule. No. Are there any questions on the work schedule? No. Okay, well, I will move that we receive the work schedule dated August 2024, seconded to Councillor Hancock. Open up for any comment. No, then we'll go to the vote. Thank you. That is carried, 10 votes for and none against. That brings us to the end of the community committee meeting, and thank you all for your input. I will for the karakia. Kia puta ki te whaio ki te ao marama, whakamoia ki a tina. Homie Huye Taikie. Thank you. We'll have afternoon tea now, and Deputy Mayor, what time would you like to start the workshop? It's 3:10 now. 3:25. Okay, thank you.